All right, so some things leading up to the protests in Birmingham. They were trying to get the public facilities integrated, and they were particularly asking that the businesses take signs away. Signs like "no coloreds allowed," which were very offensive. Okay, I think if I was not allowed in a place, I think I would be offended by it as well. And plus, the Supreme Court had already ruled that that was supposed to happen, and there were some places in the South that were not honoring the law of the land. So King and some of the other protesters were arrested, and you know that eventually the jails filled up. This particular time they were arrested for not having a permit to protest. Even today in the city of Lubbock, if you would like to conduct a protest of some kind, you have to go to City Hall and apply for and get a permit. Those are public record, which means the news media knows. Now you probably don't remember because you were just a wee little bit, but about 10 years ago, the KKK applied for a protest permit in Lubbock for a particular park, and the news media publicized it. It was a park in Southwest Lubbock. No one showed up for that protest after it was publicized. And so even though they had the permit, they did not show up and do that protest. Remember, in America, we believe in free speech. We might not like what everybody attests to, but they have the right to attest to that. And so there is this, the whole thing of parading. Now, they did not allow them to have permits even though they applied for one. So that's, a little hitch in there. Okay, while he was in jail, he read a letter written by some clergymen in the community. What are clergymen? They are priests and preachers. They are heads or leaders in churches. Okay, so I didn't print out that letter because it would just be one more thing to print, but I did post that letter for you on Google Classroom, and I need you to read that letter and understand this. That letter, his letter, is going to be a rebuttal to this letter. What does that term rebuttal mean? It is a refutation. It is a talking back, yes, but letter is what a rebuttal is, all right? And so if you will go, and I'm not going to read it to you because I'm going to be doing a lot of reading today, to Google Classroom and find, it's right next to the slides where it says the clergyman's letter. I need you to read it. You will have only one question about it on the multiple choice questions that I'll ask you about this, but you need to understand what is in that letter. Okay, so go ahead and read that to yourself. When you finish, glance up at me just so I know you finished. I'll get a chance to smile at you. Okay, look at the list on the bottom of all those clergymen and tell me what religious organizations are represented there. Jewish, how do you know? What is it? Rabbi. So there is a leader of the Jewish faith. What else? What? There's probably Catholic. How do you know? Which could also be what? Okay, or Episcopalian or Presbyterian, but probably Catholic. So we know there's the Jewish faith, the Catholic faith. What else?
Baptist.
Yeah, so all of the others are Protestant in nature. So there's Methodist. What else is there? Baptist, Episcopal. I think is there a Presbyterian in there? Okay, so all of these men are leaders in their churches and they are leaders in the communities. This is 1960. Honestly, very few people didn't go to church. People went to church because there weren't a lot of other activities to do sometimes. That was your social life. It was your place for teaching morality to your children. It was a place where people made business connections. So it was a pretty important thing to be part of. And ministers were very influential in their communities. You notice that there is not any mention of anything of the Muslim faith in there. And that's because probably there wasn't a mosque in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963. There might be today, but I'm guessing there wasn't then, okay? Because of course, the faith is more widespread and more acknowledged today than it used to be. What is it that these men want? Because they've stated pretty plainly what they want.
Demonstrations.
They want the demonstrations to stop. What do they think the demonstrations, the protests are doing? Look back at it. What are they causing? What are they doing?
Like reversing progress they've made?
Okay. They think it's inciting violence. You know that word incite? To cause or to start something? Okay, so are there words that somebody could yell or say that would incite violence? If I called your mama names, you might want to hit me. Okay? That's inciting violence. Some words. Are the protesters calling names? They are not. They are just calling for the rights that the Supreme Court has given them to be honored. Okay? So, but that's what these clergymen say. They feel like your protests are causing the people in the community to want to be violent. So that's something to kind of think about. Okay? They think instead of going to the streets, that the people should take their issues where? To the court system. Okay, and so that's what they think should happen. So King reads this letter from the clergyman that was in the paper, and he's in jail at the time, and he decides that he is going to answer their letter. He doesn't have a dictionary, he doesn't have his law books, he might have a Bible, I don't know. But he has bits and pieces of paper, and he writes this letter, and it is eventually published in one of his publications, and we have it today. It is today, and there are actually a couple of different versions of it because he had to write and rewrite it because he was in jail. And it's a version of it is in Atlanta, because remember that Martin Luther King Jr. was a minister in Montgomery during the bus boycotts. And then he was a minister in Atlanta, where his father had been a minister. And you can go to that church today. Mr. Ryan and I were in Atlanta one year, and we went to the Civil Rights Museum there and to that church. At the time, they had an actor that played Martin Luther King Jr. and did one of his speeches. It was actually fabulous. He did such a good job of it. But you can go to that. You cannot see, however, the original letter from Birmingham Jail unless you make an appointment to see it. And I would have done that if I had known that I didn't do that, because I've taught it for so many years. It would mean a lot to me, you know, to get to see it. Okay, now we have the letter. And he starts with, my dear fellow clergymen, because what is King? A clergyman himself. He wants to remind them that yes, he is also a clergyman and just one of them. And then he's going to explain, very long-windedly, why he thinks they're wrong and he's right. And he really does a good job of it. So he says, my dear fellow clergymen, we're going through, word for word, not with every single paragraph, but with many of them, because this is rich with strategies and devices that will remind us of all of them. You will be able to use this on your multiple choice that you'll take next week, and then I will give you a civil rights rhetorical analysis that won't be this, but because of this study, hopefully you'll be able to turn around and do a good job on that rhetorical analysis. Okay. While confined here in the Birmingham City Jail, I came across your recent statement calling my present activities unwise and untimely. Why do these have quotation marks around them?
Because he's quoting.
He's quoting their letter. Okay? So, word for word, their letter. He's quoting. Seldom do I pause to answer criticism of my work and ideas. If I sought to answer all the criticisms that crossed my desk, my secretaries would have little time for anything other than such correspondence in the course of the day, and I would have no time for constructive work. But, since I feel that you are men of genuine goodwill, and that your criticisms are sincerely set forth, I want to try to answer your statements in what I hope will be patient and reasonable terms. Okay. He is willing to answer them because of how he feels about them. So what I would like for you to do right now is underline how he feels about them. And I want you to go to some document like Google this, tone words. And I want you to find a word or a couple of words that represent his attitude toward these clergymen. Tone words. I know you can literally type list of tone words. Because tone is something that I want you to start working on. It's one of the more advanced things that students write about. So underline the evidence that proves his attitude toward them. I'll give you just a little bit of time to do that. Okay. When you find a good word, raise your hand. Tell me. His attitude toward them is something. Leah?
I said earnest.
Okay. He is earnest toward them. Okay. Give me another word.
Tolerant.
Tolerant. Okay. Have some more? Ben?
Sincere.
Okay. I need more. We hadn't hit on what I'm thinking yet. How does he feel toward them? Andre?
Benevolent.
Okay. Keep going. He says, what's the evidence of how he feels about them? He says they are what?
Genuine good.
Yeah, you are men of genuine goodwill, and your criticisms are sincerely set forth. So then, he has so much what for them that he is willing to answer? Respect. There's the word. Maybe you've heard the word reverence. It's one of the reasons we call a reverend. We are respectful of their position. He says, you know what, I usually don't answer criticisms. I don't have time for that. My secretaries don't have time for that. Any person who is leading a movement like this, who's a politician, is going to get a ton of criticism. He says, I would normally not take the time to answer, not even give you the time of day, but because of who you are. And I feel like what you have said to me is sincere and truthful, and you have goodwill. I'm going to take the time to answer this letter. And boy, did he. Okay. And so you're going to take time to explain all of it. Then he says, I think I should indicate why I am here in Birmingham, since you have been influenced by the view which argues against outsiders coming in. Again, an example of what? His word. Okay? So you believe there's a bunch of outsiders coming in. Every time there's a protest, I think I heard on the news this last week. We don't think this is our local people. We think this is a bunch of outsiders who come in to cause trouble. Okay, and so that's what people say, that's what they want to believe. They don't think their local people would have anything to do with it. I have the honor of serving as president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. That is something that could turn up on the APUSH, just that knowing that that was what he was a part of. An organization operating in every southern state with headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. We have some 85 affiliated organizations across the South, and one of them is the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights. Frequently, we share staff, educational, and financial resources with our affiliates. Several months ago, the affiliate here in Birmingham asked us to be on call to engage in a nonviolent direct program if such were deemed necessary. We readily consented, and when the hour came, we lived up to our promise. So I, along with several members of my staff, am here because I was invited here. I am here because I have organizational ties here. So, good rebuttal, and those of you who've debated knows that, you know this. You said this, but this is the truth, or this is wrong. That's that concession refutation thing that we've learned about. You say I'm an outsider coming in. What is his rebuttal, his refutation to that? I was invited here, and I have organizational ties. So I was invited here, I have organizational ties here. In other words, I'm not just some outsider coming in. People invited me here. I just didn't see where I could cause trouble. There we go. But more basically, I am in Birmingham because injustice is here. Just as the prophets of the 8th century BC left their villages and carried their truth, their thus saith the Lord, far beyond the boundaries of their hometowns, and just as the apostle Paul left his village of Tarsus and carried the gospel of Jesus Christ to the far corners of the Greco-Roman world, so am I compelled to carry the gospel of freedom beyond my own hometown. Like Paul, I must constantly respond to the Macedonian call for aid. What's the strategy he uses there?
Reference to the Bible.
Yes, he uses biblical allusions. He knows his audience. Will they appreciate biblical allusions? And look, there are things from both the Old and New Testament. What's from the Old Testament? And you might not know the exact names or anything, but what part of this is from the Old Testament? The 8th century BC. They left their villages. The thus saith the Lord, far beyond the boundaries. Some of those Old Testament prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah, who went to other places and spread the word about what the people should be doing, okay? Really, and I've studied it more the last few years than probably in my entire life, the Old Testament is full of a lot of stuff about justice. And when the Israelite people themselves were harming even people they had enslaved, or harming other people, widows or whatever, they were warned. You are going to be punished if you are not treating other people well. And often they were. They end up being enslaved themselves, all kinds of things, because they were not people of justice. Okay? And so he's talking a little bit about justice here. So that's the Old Testament part. What's the New Testament part? Paul. Okay. Paul is a biggie in the New Testament. If you look at what makes up the New Testament Bibles, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the Gospels, 4 books that tell the life of Jesus. Then you've got Revelation, which is a vision and a prophecy given to John. Everything in the middle were letters to churches. And guess who wrote like 2/3 of those? Paul did, okay? Any minister would love Paul because he wrote to churches. These guys are trying to be good leaders in their churches. They are ministering to the people in their churches. That's what Paul wrote about. Here's how to be a good church. Here's how to be a good Christian. And so he taps into something that was very important to them. And Tarsus is the village that Paul was from. Paul was actually a tent maker. And then he was called to a different life. And he carried, this is good, this is one of the things that King does. Paul carried the gospel of Jesus Christ. What is it that King changes in the very next sentence? What does he carry? The gospel of freedom. So we've got this lovely little change here. I guess it's in the same sentence, sorry. From the gospel of Jesus Christ to the gospel of freedom. And then the Macedonian church had asked Paul for help. It said Paul didn't say sorry, no can do. He went to their aid. That's what Paul did. Did I say Saul? No, Paul. Saul turned into Paul. And that's what King is doing. Somebody's calling for help, he's going to help them. Okay, so some nice biblical allusions. There are going to be more, and he's going to allude to, wow, philosophers. He's going to talk about who was the sheriff that was or the chief of police that you learned about in Bull. He's going to talk about him in here. Okay. Moreover, great transition. If you're like searching, you know you need more transitions. Moreover is a beautiful, beautiful one. I am cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. This is a good topic sentence. This is all going to be, this particular paragraph, about interrelatedness. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Ooh, do you see what he did in that sentence? What did he do? Injustice, justice,
Parallel.
anywhere, ever. Beautiful antithesis. This particular kind has a couple of different names that it's called. One is chiasmus. We talked about that in Heinrich's Thank You for Arguing. And sometimes it's called anti-metabolite. They used to have words like that on the AP Lang and Lit test. They took them off because they realized there wasn't really a ton of value in students just being able to name something that wasn't a simile, a metaphor, or a paradox. So great changes here. A true chiasmus is, it's not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. It's a perfect flip. This isn't a perfect flip because he changes the words, but that's the closest thing we have to what we can call it. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. We're going to get back to that in a minute. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. See it again? One, all, directly, indirectly. Beautiful. This is also a paradox. What's a paradox? Anybody remember? Because this does show up on the AP Lang exam sometimes. A paradox is something that shouldn't be true, like you go, that doesn't make sense, but it is true. So it's a truth that's kind of ironic. Then he says, anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider anywhere within its boundaries. Did I skip this? Never again can we afford to live with the narrow, provincial, outside agitator idea. Two things I want to talk about. One, mutual, in a single garment of destiny. What's that an example of? It's not a hard thing. We have a single garment of destiny. All our fates and our destinies are being compared. And so what is it? It's a metaphor.
Oh.
If you look at your garment that you have on, you can hardly tell from one thread to the next because it is woven together so well that it has to all come together to create whatever is being created. And he's saying all of us are like all of those threads together. We are one garment and we all share a what? A destiny or fate. That gets me a little bit because I think those people in other parts of the state, they don't affect me. Those people in different states and different countries, I think of them as being far away. But he's saying we're all affected by laws and justice and injustice. So it just, for me, that got me a little bit. It's good for me. The other thing is never again can we afford to live with the narrow, provincial, outside agitator idea. Do you know the word provincial? It's sung in Beauty and the Beast, if you remember that. I want so much more than this provincial life. Almost. It's a French word from province, and it's like country, hillbilly, backwoods, okay? And so that idea that we don't want outsiders in here, we don't want the Yankees coming down to the south, he says that idea is very provincial. It's very backwoods. It's very hillbilly. It's not the way we really are. In fact, he says, if you live in the United States, you are an American, okay? And so he doesn't like that idea because he says we are all share this destiny together. He probably would be more of a federal than a states' rights person because he thinks a big picture like that is the United States. Okay, you, who is he talking about? The clergyman. You deplore. What does it mean to deplore something? Hate. You hate the demonstrations taking place in Birmingham. But your statement, I am sorry to say, fails to express a similar concern for the conditions that brought about the demonstrations. I am sure that none of you would want to rest content with the superficial kind of social analysis that deals merely with effects and does not grapple with underlying causes. It is unfortunate that demonstrations are taking place in Birmingham, but it is even more unfortunate that the city's white power structure left the Negro, which is not the N-word, community with no alternative. You hate the demonstrations. What should you hate?
What caused them?
What caused the demonstrations? Now I want you to look at his tone here, okay? When he says to them, surely you aren't the kind of men who do superficial analysis. How would you feel if somebody told you you were superficial? What are the connotations of that word? Pretty insulting. These are men of the cloth, of all the people in a community who should really grapple with things about humanity. Ministers, right? And so the connotations when he says they have a superficial social analysis, that's pretty insulting. And I bet, as most people, when they read that, they were defensive. But then maybe when they stopped to think about it, maybe we need to think of why these demonstrations are taking place, not just that they are taking place.
Is there a reply to this? Did they write another letter?
No, they did not.
A rebuttal.
They would have been, okay, sorry.
Because he says there is no alternative. What is the alternative that they want? What do they want? The clergymen. They want people to go where? Guess what? They've been to the courts. Okay? And still things happen. He wants them to negotiate. Guess what? They've negotiated. Okay? They have no alternative except the demonstrations. That's what all they feel they have left. So this is pretty poignant. It is critical toward the clergyman, still polite and nice, but he certainly is calling them on the carpet for not looking at the big picture of things. And if they're good men and they really do care about society, maybe they would kind of change their tune a little bit. Okay, he's going to shift here to an expository expository mode. Do you remember what that term means? It's an explanation. In any nonviolent campaign, there are 4 basic steps. So he's going to explain what we go through before we do any kind of action. Number 1, collection of the facts to determine whether injustices exist. Number 2, negotiation. Number 3, self-purification. Then we take action, number 4. So we do our research. We see if anything does need to be done. We try to negotiate with the powers that be in the community to get some changes made. Then we do this thing called self-purification, which the next page is going to explain to us. Then we will actually do some kind of action. He says, we have gone through all of these steps in Birmingham. There can be no gainsaying the fact, this is step 1, that racial injustice engulfs this community. Birmingham is probably the most thoroughly segregated city in the United States. Its ugly record of brutality is widely known. Negroes have experienced grossly unjust treatment in the courts. There have been more unsolved bombings of Negro homes and churches in Birmingham than in any other city in the nation. In fact, what did we learn in David and Goliath? Its nickname was Bombingham. Probably need to be there. These are the hard, brutal facts of the case. So there is step one. They've done their research. On the basis of these conditions, Negro leaders sought to negotiate with the city fathers, but the latter consistently refused to engage in good faith negotiation. Number two, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the insulting signs being removed. Then, last September came the opportunity to talk with the leaders of Birmingham's economic community, the business leaders. In the course of the negotiations, certain promises were made by the merchants. For example, to remove the store's humiliating racial signs, the no coloreds allowed kinds of signs. On the basis of these promises, the Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, we know about him, he's talked about in David and Goliath, and the leaders of the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights agreed to a moratorium on all the demonstrations. What's a moratorium? It's a pause, it's a break, okay? As the weeks and months went by, we realized that we were the victims of a broken promise. A few signs, briefly removed, returned, the others remained. Okay? So, here's what happened during negotiation. They said they were going to remove them, they did for a little while, and then the signs came back. Okay? Turn over the back. As in so many past experiences, our hopes had been blasted and the shadow of deep disappointment settled upon us. I love this because he expresses their emotions of how they felt. I think sometimes when we're talking about the other side, we don't think about their feelings and emotions. He said, we were deeply disappointed. You made promises and you did not keep those promises. And so our hopes had been blasted. We had no alternative except to prepare for direct action, whereby we would present our bodies as a means of laying our case before the conscience of the local and national community. Mindful of the difficulties, we decided to undertake a process of self-purification. There's 3. We began a series of workshops on nonviolence, and we repeatedly asked ourselves, are you able to accept blows without retaliating? Are you able to endure the ordeal of jail? It's something interesting to think about. I just know how I was as a basketball player. If somebody slung an elbow at me, they were getting it back again. And so I would have to really prepare my heart and mind to stand there and let somebody hit me and not retaliate. Would I want to go to jail? Never in a million years. And so another thing they had to prepare themselves for. And we know the jail conditions when they put child after child, teenager after teenager in jail. What were the conditions? Like what? Give me some details. Do you remember?
Cluttered.
There were, in a cell where there were supposed to be 8 people,
Claustrophobic.
you would just be packed. I am thinking, and I always think about this, going to the bathroom. How terrible. Not good food, not sanitary. To prepare yourself mentally to face that would be pretty tough to do. So, but they're talking to anybody who's a part of the protest ahead of time. And remember, not very many people took them up on this and were actually part of the protests. 10 one time, a dozen another time. You had to be ready for this, and this was really a complicated and difficult thing to do. Are you able to endure the ordeal? Okay, we decided to schedule our direct action program for the Easter season, which would be like our season we're in right now. Realizing that except for Christmas, this is the main shopping period of the year. Knowing that a strong economic withdrawal program would be the byproduct of the direct action, we felt that this would be the best time to bring pressure to bear on the merchants for the needed change. What are they going to do? They're going to boycott. They're going to boycott the stores. Okay, So think about when you're a child, and I don't know if your family did Easter very big. My family did. I love Easter. I love Easter more than I love Christmas. I just love that holiday. And so, what do people spend money on in the Easter holiday? Eggs, which are going to be really expensive this year. Okay, what else? Candy. Always have to be treats for the children, right? What else? Easter baskets. Clothes. I don't know, but until I was 18, my mother bought me a new dress every Easter. This year, I told my daughter, let's go get you an Easter dress. Just like it's spring, new pair of shoes, new dress. My mother did not allow us to wear white after Labor Day or before Easter. Or after, we had to wait until after Easter because she said that's just not done. They didn't have winter white then. Okay. What else would you spend money on? Okay. I wouldn't, but maybe you do. Some people do.
Maybe like something religious, like a Bible.
You might. Okay, you get your new clothes. Some of you, even little guys, you probably got new little pastel shirts and little cute shorts and stuff to wear to church. Food! Isn't Easter a big feast day?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. We get together with Mr. Ryan's family. I am the official Easter egg judge. I'm the only one in the family that cannot be bribed. And everybody decorates Easter eggs, and I go off and then come back in and I judge the Easter eggs. It's really a lot of fun. And plus, I don't have to decorate Easter eggs. But anyway, we do it up big, and I bet you do in your family too. We love ham, and we've done all this, extra stuff. Some people are having lamb or whatever. But it is a big feast day. So you think about those grocers who have ordered eggs and special meats and all of these things, and if half your community, at least the black members of your community, are boycotting, what does that mean? You are stuck with a bunch of stuff, and it's either going to go to waste or you're going to have to really cut the prices to eventually sell it. And so you're not making what you would expect to make at a big holiday. So Christmas is past. This is the next big holiday, and so they decide they want everybody in the black community and everybody who joins them in what they believe to boycott the stores during the Easter time. And that would probably be disappointing to some people. Children have definitely outgrown the Easter clothes from last year. And don't kids look forward to all of those things? Probably they did not all understand what was going on. But that's the first direct action that they decide on, is this boycott. So we're going to get more about what is a direct action later, and they are always nonviolent in King's movement. And so we'll talk about those. That's how far we're going to get today. We are going to do more than that on Thursday.